All right. Welcome. This is David Grubb, and I'm filling in for AJ Jones today on Team Texas Tuesday. We're going to have a lot of fun today, I hope. A lot of topics to talk about in hour two. My friend Dino Hanson will be joining the show, and he and I will be talking about the NBA. We'll be talking about NFL. We'll be talking about last night's the historic debut of the first all black officiating crew in the NFL and why that is significant. And we got plenty more as well. But what I wanted to start with today is last night's Monday Night Football game. And if you were watching, you saw the Rams come out and win that one 27-24. Tom Brady did not play particularly well. He goes 26 out of 48 for 216 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And at this point, I have never been convinced about the greatness of the Tampa Bay Bucks. From the start of the season, I felt like that Tampa had been overrated just because of the name Tom Brady. Tom Brady is 43 years old, and we've never seen a quarterback at 43 do anything of note in the NFL. Father Time, as they say, is undefeated. And last night he showed again why Tom Brady is much closer to the end of his career than he may think. The Buccaneers have been terrible in primetime games this season. Keith, you're exactly right. They have been terrible in primetime games this season. They are 7-4. They are 2-4 against teams that are 500 or better. 2-4 against teams that are 500 or better. And in those games, Tom Brady is noticeably worse than he is against bad teams. They're 5-0 against teams below 500. And in those games, Tom Brady has 14 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. So he's beating up on the bad guys. But when you play a quality team like the Rams, even with their flaws, Rams turned it over twice last night too. Jared Goff was frustrating. If you are a Rams fan, you're still trying to figure out if he's a legitimate, long-term, high-caliber NFL starting quarterback, because he will do something great and he will frustrate you right on the other end. But at the same time, against winning teams, Tom Brady this season, 11 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. When you are over 40, when you get to quarterbacks who get to that 40-year-old range and above, and some it's earlier than that, you can have a great game. You can have a great couple of games. But no matter where you are in sports, at some point, the problem is not that you don't have talent anymore. The problem is that not that you don't know the game anymore. The problem is you cannot string together enough consistent efforts to take your team to where it needs to go. Again, Peyton Manning his final season only played 8 games and was dragged to the Super Bowl by that defense. Tom Brady's last Super Bowl win was largely in part because of that defense, a top 5 defense. We were told that the Buccaneers had a top 5 defense, and yet they allowed Jared Goff to throw for 376 yards on them. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods ran wild all over them in that game. So to sit there and think that Tom Brady is still the Tom Brady of old and not just old Tom Brady, that seems like a problem. You can't have the Buccaneers in your top 5 at this point in the NFL. And if I was talking top 5, my top 5 right now is Pittsburgh, Kansas City, New Orleans, Buffalo, and Green Bay. And from Green Bay down, we're talking slivers of difference between Green Bay or Arizona or Seattle. Like these are teams that are just extremely similar. But at the top of this list, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, New Orleans, and even Buffalo at 4 is shaky from time to time. But Tampa's not in that group. They're not in that group. They can't run the ball. They cannot run the ball. And if you can't run the ball, you can't protect your quarterback in Tom Brady. He can't throw 48 passes in a game and expect to win. 48 passes in a game in the NFL. It doesn't work anymore. It means you're highly inefficient. Tom Brady is putting up some of the worst numbers in his career in average yards per attempt. He's dead last in the NFC South. You know, people made a big deal about Drew Brees throwing the ball down the field. Brady is worse than Brees this season when it comes to average yards per attempt. Brady has been trending downward the last 3 seasons. And the Buccaneers essentially mortgaged their future. And instead of thinking that they could maybe improve Jameis Winston or find a lower cost alternative, they went all in on Tom Brady. And I don't think that you paid that kind of money in Tampa for 7-4 and 2-4 against winning teams. And you watched last night, Antonio Brown gets 13 targets from Tom Brady. Antonio Brown gets 13 targets. He was brought in to be the third receiver. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, these were 2,000-yard receivers last season. These were big play guys. And now they're catching passes for 6, 7, 8 yards at a pop. They cannot be happy. Brady's still looking for Gronkowski like it's 2012. And it's just not. Neither one of them is the same. They're not difference makers. Leonard Fournette, you brought him in. They thought he was going to augment the running game. You've gotten nothing out of him. You're getting nothing out of Ronald Jones. So if you don't have any balance and you're going to rely on Tom Brady when he cannot get the ball down the field, and that's another thing for older quarterbacks too. They are not built for comebacks. They are not built for comebacks. If they fall behind, that dinking and dunking, going 6, 7 yards, is not going to get it done. Not if your defense is giving up 27. And I said this when Drew Brees went down. I said if the Saints, with the way that defense is playing, is the Saints can put up 24 in a game, they're in great shape. 24 in a game, they're in great shape. And so far, these last few weeks, their defense has done that kind of job. Tampa Bay's defense against some mediocre teams, and even against a fairly good Rams offense, not a great one, but a good Rams offense. This was supposed to be one of the best defenses in the league. They have not shown that they are. They gave up over 400 yards last night. So if you're going to talk about giving up 400 yards in a primetime game at home, when the Rams are the ones flying across country, and over again, we're told that the cross-country trip is the most difficult trip for people to make from the west to the east. And what do? You lay an egg at home. You lay an egg at home. And the Buccaneers' last 3 games against winning teams, whether it's been the Rams, the Saints, who embarrassed them 38-3, and then on top of that, they lost to the Bears. And I think they're the last time the Bears won was when they beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So last night, and people can say, oh, well, Tom Brady will get it together and the Bucs will get it together and they'll figure this out. No, I just don't see it. They'll make the playoffs, sure. But at this point, does anybody realistically see Tampa Bay as a Super Bowl team? I don't see how you can. They have no balance. No balance. And that defense has not stepped up against the very best competition there is. There was a historic moment, of course, last night in that for the first time in NFL history, you had an all-black officiating crew. And of course, the social media feedback was what you would expect. People say, why is this a big deal? Why is everything about race? Why? Because, again, nobody noticed that there's a person of color out there. So for it to be an entire group of them, yeah, that's notable. It's notable. And it's not a stunt because they still have to do their jobs. They are judged by the quality of their work. But to get that kind of collective group, to have that happen on national television in a primetime game, and for people to see that, again, symbols do mean something. If they didn't, people wouldn't be fighting so hard for some of these symbols that we know are negative. So this is representation. And yes, the NFL certainly has a long way to go. Hispanics, Asians. There are women in the NFL officiating now. There are women in college football. There are women in the NBA. And we still need to see more progress because these are jobs that are not gender specific. They're not racially specific. So you should see more of these types of things because, again, it's a league that's 60% black. It's a sport that's predominantly black. So why aren't you seeing bigger numbers of representation? And you can't say it's because of a lack of interest because I've worked with plenty of black officials. I was an official for a while. And there are plenty of us because it's a way to stay involved with the game. And we know at the highest levels, it pays really well. It pays really well when you get to the NFL or to the major collegiate level. Now you're traveling a lot, but there was no controversy. And right, Keith, you're absolutely right. They did a masterful job because you didn't notice them. There was no attention to them because they weren't a spectacle. The best thing about officiating when the game is over is that nobody's talking about it. That's always been the hallmark of a good game. Nobody's talking about it. And nobody's talking about any bad calls that they had. Nobody's talking about any egregious penalties. Nobody's talking about that. It wasn't perfect. No game's perfect. But they aren't the story today. And that's exactly how it's supposed to work. They got the opportunity to do their job. And that's all people ask for, is give me the opportunity to do my job. I don't have to be, every person doesn't have to be exceptional because if everybody was exceptional, then how would you measure it? But it's just the ability to engage in the business, in the marketplace, to have an opportunity to succeed or fail and only be judged on your work. And to do that, you have to be in the building. You have to be on the field. And so that's what people are fighting for. And so to see it was important. It was important. Because there are people who will grow up their entire lives and never see that. But I can tell you, we've all seen the reverse. We have all seen games where it's been all white officials. And we just take that as the norm. And I tell people all the time, when we talk about jobs and we talk about professions and who do you see, and just simple questions. And I say, close your eyes and describe an American to me. Close your eyes and describe a doctor to me. Close your eyes and describe the president to me. Not just if what would be presidential. And I imagine that more times than not, most people will describe somebody that looks like them, particularly if you are in the majority, because that's what you see. So you wouldn't consider, it plays with our gender roles. If somebody said, if you think about, imagine a football coach, you're probably going to imagine a man. But there are women coaching football. And there are women coaching basketball. There are all these things. So there are women, as people would assume doctor. They say, oh, who is your doctor? What's his name? So all of those things, this is part of breaking down that natural inclination due to the structures that we have to just assume that this is what someone looks like, that this is what someone is capable of. I was listening to a Bomani Jones podcast, and he was talking about the Tuskegee Airmen for Veterans Day. And a lot of times when people discuss the Tuskegee Airmen, they talk about how they proved something to the world. And he said, that's where we're framing it all wrong. And I paused for a second because I wanted to see where that was going, because I said, okay, where is this going? And he said the reason it's framed improperly is because there is no earning of that respect in that regard. There's no amount of good works that will prove to society that all of us are worthy. The good works of 1 or 10 or 50 Black people is not going to make people, the majority, say, well, they're all capable of these things. They can all do these things. It just works for that group of people. And so I understood that. And he went on to say that the thing that he hoped most was that those pilots proved something to themselves. That yes, I can do this. And because I hadn't seen this before, I had never seen a Black pilot before, I get to be the first and experience that and have honor in that and have pride in that for myself and for who may come next. But it isn't to prove anything to the outside world. And I thought that that was an extremely insightful take, because I can't imagine what it's like to be that level of groundbreaker, to be a person placed in that type of spotlight where they absolutely have to be perfect, and no one else has to be perfect. But when you're the first, and you're either a woman, a person of color, whatever, you almost have to be perfect. Whether it's Jackie Robinson or whomever, you almost have to be perfect. If we can, let's go ahead and take a break right now. And when we come back, we'll have more here on the lunch break on KYOK. I'm David Grubb, filling in for AJ Jones. And we'll be back in a couple minutes. Okay, I'm sorry. We had a little technical issue. I thought the break was going to run, so we'll do the next break in about 20 minutes or so. So to come back, um I don't know if people remember, but this weekend Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. this weekend in Los Angeles at the Staples Center, Saturday night. Iron Mike, the youngest heavyweight champion of all time, taking on Roy Jones, a guy who went from 154 pounds to being a heavyweight champion himself. Now, Mike Tyson is 55 years old, 54 years old. Um, Roy Jones, it hasn't fought in 15 years. Roy Jones last fought in 2018 and has been fighting pretty consistently, is in boxing shape. If you have not seen the pictures of Iron Mike on the internet, he looks, let's just say, powerful. He looks like the former baddest man on the planet, as he was known during his heyday. And Mike has had one of those careers that felt like, we didn't get to see the greatest part of it. We didn't get to see the greatest part of it. We missed it because of the downfall, the steep downfall that he had, starting with his conviction for rape, and then just everything that happened afterwards. It just wasn't ever right for Mike. We know about his financial issues, and then all the confessionals, the things that Mike realized with his mental health. We talked about mental health yesterday. And Mike Tyson is one of those people that had to deal with his mental health. That upbringing in Brownsville, New York, which was horrible. And for him, I think he's looking for some closure. I don't know if he plans to do this a bunch of times, but I think he's looking for some closure, because the person that ended the lion's share of his career, the person that ended that was a guy who was chasing some money because of debt. He wasn't fighting because he thought he could win a championship again. He was fighting to make some money. And that's a terrible reason to be out there fighting, because if you're going to take punches, you better want to be in there in the ring. And he didn't want to be in there during the final years of his career. I'm not sure why Roy Jones is doing this. Roy Jones is the one that I'm trying to figure out, because Roy seemed to not want to do this almost immediately after saying that he would. Get the reason why. Because this fight was supposed to take place a month ago, and Mike had to postpone it. Roy wanted to fight then, which of course would have given Mike less time to train. The thing with this is, I think our natural instinct, everybody who's paid attention, your natural instinct is to think that Mike is going to kill Roy. Like, that power is the thing. When you have two guys who may not move as well, it's, can you catch him one time? Do you get him with the body blow and put him down? Because that's the rules for this are incredibly strange. And I'm going to go down these rules, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen for even an exhibition bout. So they'll be wearing 12-ounce gloves, which are the heavier gloves. They're more padded. They won't be wearing headgear. There are no official sanctioned judges here. There will be some representatives there to judge the quality of this fight, but there is not a official winner or loser here. But it says the bout will be stopped for any real cuts, and both fighters won't be allowed to knock out. To the California State athletic commissioner, executive roster. How are you going to tell two men who fight for a living now it's the best life on the line? The point of boxing is to give the other person a concussion or to pummel their body enough that they submit to you. And you're going to tell these guys that they can't go for a knockout? If I'm Roy Jones, then I don't want to get embarrassed out there. And if I'm Mike Tyson, I don't want to get embarrassed either. And I think if you're Mike Tyson, you want to show you have the power. And I get that it's not, it's not a sporting event because it's an exhibition and it is about entertainment. But again, nobody wants to be embarrassed. Nobody wants to have this turn into a joke. Not Mike Tyson and not Roy Jones Jr., who are two of the most decorated fighters in boxing history. Roy Jones, I mean, pound for pound, Roy was the guy for a number of years. Pound for pound, he was that guy. It was so bad for Roy Jones in beating people that he had to find ways to make himself interested in boxing people. Like, if you remember, there were times when Roy Jones, once he played a basketball game, a full professional basketball game, and then boxed that night and won the fight. I've seen Roy give a concert. Remember, Roy had a rap career for a while. And Roy did a concert and then did a fight. Like, Roy would try to find ways to make it interesting because he was so good at his peak that he destroyed guys like Montel Griffin, like Bernard Hopkins, who Bernard Hopkins was fighting into his 50s. Let us not forget. Bernard Hopkins, I think his last fight was at 51. So Roy Jones has seen everything. To go from 154 to heavyweight, you don't do that to come out of a semi-retirement and be embarrassed by Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson certainly is not coming to get knocked out. Yeah, Willie Gibson knows, y'all must have forgot. Yes. Those body head bangers. The body head banger album. And look, Roy Jones was the only boxer ever on the Jordan brand. That's how big he was. He was the only boxer to be on Jordan brand. And I don't think there's been one since. So it's just, these were cultural phenomenons. Mike Tyson, if people don't remember what it was like up until 1987, and even beyond that, the aura was still there up until Lennox Lewis. Or because even after Evander Holyfield, he was able to come back and get a title. But the aura of Mike Tyson, the cut towel, no socks, black shoes, walking in the ring silently, there was nothing like it. My father watched George Foreman, and of course you had Sonny Liston prior to that, the biggest, when you think about the biggest bullies in boxing, John the Beast Mugabe on a lower level, not the heavyweight level. But with that, Mike had something different. That power, the quickness at his peak, we hadn't seen. And the fact that he was so much smaller than other guys, 5'8", 5'9", and coming up under with that uppercut and just watching people crumble in front of him. And that's probably why the heavyweight division now needs something like this. Because we don't talk about who the heavyweight champion of the world is. We know it's Tyson Fury. But I don't think that there's near the passion. And boxing, of course, has changed a lot over the last 30 years. But there's not near the passion for Tyson Fury or for Deontay Wilder that there was for Mike Tyson or for Roy Jones, for that matter. Those were events. Those were events. And I guarantee you, there are going to be a lot of people paying out for that pay-per-view this weekend to watch that fight. A lot of people. Because what else is there to do, too? Because college football, as we can get into more games continuing to be canceled, more teams stopping practices. So on Saturday, watching Mike Tyson and Roy Jones might be your only option that night, the way things are going. I'm literally surprised that we have not made more of a fuss about the fact that they continue to move on with this college football season as teams continue to have to cancel games, as schools continue to lose revenue, as you continue to have players isolated, coaches isolated. At what point does it not make sense anymore? It didn't make sense to me to start. And yet we continue this, and you still see Dabo Swinney. Again, more comments. He just will not let this go. I get it. You want to win games. I get it. You're trying to get paid and go to get your bonuses for going to the national semifinal and the national championship, and you feel like you want to be able to, collect another ACC title. I get all those things. But ultimately, the student athletes, quote unquote, are supposed to come first. They're supposed to come first. And we're continuing to put these kids in a situation where they are responsible for keeping athletic departments afloat. They are responsible for keeping universities afloat. And we're willing to put them out there and their health at risk for those dollars. And we're going to look back in a few years from now, and we're going to see what the impact of that was. And we're going to have to see how many families have to fight to be protected, to be compensated for what they're going to lose. Because there are players who are going to lose careers because of this. There are players who will, there's already been one, maybe there will be others who have will lose their lives to this virus, unfortunately. So what's an acceptable casualty count? The SEC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and as this thing goes up, it's up to almost record levels in 40-something states now. And yet we're going to keep having these kids travel when the government has just said, again, particularly this week, that they don't want you to travel. They don't want you to fly. And we're going to have these kids flying to entertain and to create revenue for others. And they will get nothing for it. Nothing for it. Because the damage has been done regardless. People said, well, they needed this season. Some of these guys needed them to get. They needed the season in order to get seen by scouts. There are a lot of players who, because of the way the schedule has worked, who, because of the way COVID is broken, there are going to be guys who didn't play 5 games this season. So what advantage is there of getting that tape? What advantage is there? Are you going to know about that player that you didn't know the year before when they're not playing the same competition? When you have schools that they're the best schools on their schedule, they may have completely missed because of postponements, cancellations, or just the way scheduling had to be done. So the damage is done. And it's going to be much like the NBA had to deal with it. The NBA had to deal with the fact there was no NCAA tournament, that there was no summer league. And you have all these kids who got drafted last week, and they're going to be in training camp December 1st. Well, so what did they have to do? The teams had to do more work. They had to get out there and scout more. They had to get out there and pay more attention to what the tape showed already. They had to do more digging and talk to assistant coaches. They had to do more information to talk to their teammates, talk to their friends. You just got to do more work. Yes, it's not something that you would enjoy doing, but these are the circumstances, and we all had to adjust. So what is the benefit other than the financial gain for the schools and the sponsors and the television networks? because it doesn't benefit the NFL to have these players potentially exposed to something. And you may lose top tier talent because of it, or you may lose a wave of guys who took this year off and are going to go stay in school this year and the next year because they get their COVID waiver, who normally would have come out pro this year. So you change everything. And if you have an influx of talent, 2 years worth of talent coming into the draft at the same time, how many of those young men are affected because their draft status just goes backwards, not because they got any worse as a player, but because now the market is flooded potentially with more talent at the wrong time for them. So everybody's going to get hurt, but the players themselves are going to take the biggest hit. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar business. College football is a multi-billion-dollar business for everyone involved except for the players. So why, if every equation that you do, no matter how the math works, only one group is always going to come away with the negative, and that group being the student athletes, if they're the ones who are the most vulnerable, if they're the ones who need to be protected, then why aren't we protecting them? Why aren't we protecting them? What's the mission of the university? What is the mission of the university? It's not to turn kids into revenue sources for the school. And they'll be asking for, the ironic thing is that they'll be asking for money from these kids when they leave, when they go off into the NFL, or if they don't, they'll get those same postcards and emails that we get asking for more money after they've generated all this revenue for these schools. The schools are going to have the nerve and call them and ask them for more money. So it's exploitation on just the highest levels, And even the NCAA basketball, when Rick Pitino goes on social media and says the NCAA needs to move the entire season to March at the very least and have the tournament in May so that we can see if the vaccine is actually viable and if it can have some impact. When Rick Pitino, who most of us would characterize as somebody who would do anything to win, that basketball is the most important, thing in his life, that we've seen him cut corners before and get in a little bit of trouble. But even then, he recognizes, hey, maybe it's not right to start a basketball season in the middle of flu season with a sport that is has much less between you and your opponent than football. You are constantly touching in basketball, rebounding, boxing out. That's the reason the NBA went to a bubble, because you're going to be, anybody who's played the games know courts, fields, whatever, are filthy places. And it's also impossible to convince athletes not to touch each other. Whether it's a high five, whether you play in the game itself, or whether it's, whatever you do, hugging your teammate after a big play, you saw it. MLB couldn't stop it. NFL can't stop it. So if professionals can't stop it, what makes you think you're going to convince 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds to follow those protocols? And then we blame them and say that they're not being mature for following those protocols at that age, when we all know what we were like at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. How many rules did we struggle to remember at that time? How many times did you just defy something because you just needed to? You just felt like I need to just challenge something. That's what young adulthood is. And so you're going to put those kids in that position, and again, we're going to isolate them and say we're going to have this NCAA tournament in one site. And I just don't see how that works, because you're taking those kids away even more. The isolation that we're already dealing with, even more. And I think it's just a tremendous problem going forward for college sports. Let me see if I can get this going this time, so, to function on this break. Let me see. Okay. All right, so we're just having a little issue with it to run it. I'll check that at the top of the hour because I just okay. I think I got this. All right, let me see. I'll try to play this one here. We'll go with this ad.
Hello, my name is Margaret, and I'm not a paid actor. I'm simply a very satisfied customer that has received good advice from the Care Team Insurance. They have helped me getting us insured. Without the help from the Care Team, we would not have had health insurance. Care Team has saved my daughter's life.
This is one of the many great results of Care Team's efforts. Let Care Team assist you with our free enrollment assistance program. Call now, 210-899-4227. There are over 13 million people without medical insurance that should qualify for plans starting at $0 to $50 per month. This is AJ Jones. KCHL listeners, I want you to call now and see what you qualify for at 210-899-4227. That's 210-899-4227 or visit careteamcares.com.
And I'm going to go ahead and read this one as well while we're on this break. One more for this commercial. We're going to try to get these technical difficulties out the way. I'm doing this remotely from Louisiana, so it's a little bit of a balancing process for us. So here's another commercial real quick, and then we'll be back with more of the lunch break.
Now through Christmas. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's AJ Jones with the lunch break on the legendary KYOK AM 1140 and 92.3 FM. It's that time of year when we are reminded of all the things we should be thankful for, and that it's more blessed to give than to receive. So with that in mind, on Wednesdays from now through Christmas, we'll give you a chance to win a gift certificate from Butterball. That's right, you can win a gift certificate for a Butterball turkey on Wednesdays on the lunch break between 12 and 2. Just be the right caller, and your Butterball turkey will be on us at the legendary KYOK AM 1140 at 92.3 FM.
All right, let's get back to it. Like I said, we'll figure this out. A little technical stuff. That just means I get to talk more time. This is more time listening to Mama Loda's voice here on KYOK radio. The lunch break. AJ Jones is off today and tomorrow. I am David Grubb, and I'll be filling in for him. At the 1 o'clock hour, I'll be joined by Dino Hanson, a former college and pro basketball player, played overseas. Has also worked for a couple of NBA teams. And we're going to talk a lot about some more of the movement. Obviously, the Rockets brought in Boogie Cousins, and we certainly have some experience with Boogie here in New Orleans. And we'll talk about that and see what he could potentially add to a Houston team that is trying to get taller, certainly. If you add Boogie Cousins, you add Christian Wood, they're adding length, which is something that we know they did not have last season. So Dino will have a lot to talk about there. One of the other things I wanted to get into today is yesterday I just on my podcast, Hard to Paint, and you can get it anywhere where you listen to podcasts. I've had a really involved conversation about what's going on at LSU. And if you're not aware, LSU is the latest school to be dealing with sexual assault allegations that have been ignored by the administration. And there have been multiple reports, first USA Today, and then we've had some former student athletes reconfirm a lot of these details that they had spoken to members of the athletic administration, their own coaching staffs, and told them their stories, and they were ignored. That's not the only problem for the program. Between that and what's going on with the basketball program and recruiting, LSU's finding itself in the same position as a school like we saw with Baylor a few years ago. And you saw the toll that Baylor paid for that scandal under Art Briles, where a number of players had either been admitted to school knowing that they had sexual assault allegations in their past, or once they were in school and there were allegations that the athletic department brushed over them. You saw the same thing at Michigan State. Cost coach his job. It would be something akin to a kingdom being toppled if Ed Orgeron loses his job after 1 year after winning the national championship. But it's getting to the point where, because you look at Penn State and you have James Franklin getting into a hazing situation and treating his players in a manner that in no way should be happening. And you talk about players telling each other they're going to Sandusky another player, which, if that refers to, of course, Jerry Sandusky, who sexually assaulted a number of young boys. When you have players saying that in your locker room, and again, the allegations are that Coach Franklin pushed that under the rug. When you have that going, I don't know how you can keep your job. But the question again becomes, in college athletics, what is it? Is it the dollar? And if the dollar is the only answer, if every time you come back to it, the answer is money, then we have a bad prop. We have a system that's just broken. It's broken beyond repair. You cannot fix it. So what do you do differently? The biggest thing is that parents have to change. Because who's giving you the advice on where to send your child? Who's telling you what's the best thing for your child? It absolutely is. It is a huge problem when you know that you've got a player who had sexual assault charges. And part of this is, ultimately we have to continue to examine the culture around football and the permissiveness that we equate with it, the excuses that we make for aggression outside of the game. The boys will be boys thing. The boys are naturally this, this is what young men do. No, we wouldn't permit that in any other area of life. You would not permit an 18, 19-year-old boy who's applying to school, if he had that kind of thing, you're not getting in. Doesn't matter what your academics are. But we see it, it's not just football, because we can go back to what happened at Stanford, where the swimmer was caught raping a young woman. And then the judges say that they don't want to ruin his life. They don't want to ruin his life. So that athletic privilege goes beyond certain things that particularly for men in that regard. I don't know if you're going to see too many female athletes getting away with assaults or things like that. But with male athletes, it's permitted. And I talked to a number of people that we all know it in the cities where we either went to school or the cities where schools are right now. If you live in a city where there's a major university, when you went to school, you knew that there were times when athletes got away with stuff, fights, things that they weren't supposed to do, that you couldn't have got away with. You would have been in front of the university judiciary. You'd been talking about being suspended or academic probation or expulsion. But you don't, in a sense, they'll say you don't generate any money for the university, but those checks that our parents sent, I think, generated some revenue for that university. I think I paid my costs, but we wouldn't get those same privileges. So, I mean, you look, there was Vanderbilt a long time ago. What they did is they took their athletic department, and athletic departments on most universities sit by themselves. The athletic department is an institution unto itself. At Vanderbilt, they took the athletic department and brought it right back in under student affairs. So the athletic director works for the Office of Student Affairs. And the things that are overseen are not overseen by the athletic director. The things about discipline, all those things, they're treated like normal students. So they are still treated like normal students, which changed. Absolutely. Yeah, we know. Yeah, UT players can get away with murder for years. Yeah, we all know it. Every major, and even small schools, it doesn't have to be UT. I mean, there's the SMU scandal didn't happen because SMU was the greatest school ever at football. It happened because those people exist at every institution. You're absolutely right. It's misogyny. Boys will be boys is an excuse for misogyny. Women are objects, in that ultimately they are responsible for what men do. That those girls shouldn't have put themselves in that position. Why were you at that place? Why were you with that guy? Didn't you know what you were getting yourself into? But like the thing is, it doesn't matter how much money in my pocket. The problem is on the person who robs me. Even if I'm covered in money, the decision to rob me is the bad decision, the worst decision, the criminal decision. So I don't care if the girl was at a party. I don't care if what she was wearing. We can't excuse it as boys will be boys. These are criminal, felonious assaults. And they need to be treated as such. Because how, again, if these coaches are going in and these academic institutions are saying, we are here to help your child make that transition from childhood to adulthood, where they're supposed to learn the consequences of act, they're supposed to grow, develop, learn how to interact with other adults, learn how to be a productive member of society. That's what we rely on institutions to do. And if you have that kind of behavior and you excuse it, what are you telling that person for the long term? We say it with parents all the time. If you don't discipline your kids when they're little, you can't be surprised when they act crazy when they're older. Well, if you entitle athletes to believe that they can get away with crime, not just a little bit, it's not being late to class, it's not about doing your homework. We're talking about crime. And coaches turning the other way. And we see these stories time and time again. They go all the way back to their high schools, to their middle schools. As soon as they're identified as having that potential to get out, then they will do it. They will do it. And if you're a kid, how are you going to blame a kid when people take all the walls away and take all the rules away and throw nothing but candy and cookies and treats at you and toys, and they give you all this stuff and they indulge everything that the very worst things about you. And these people indulge you your entire life. And then when the moment it's taken away, they don't know how to react. They can't function in a world where they are not exceptional, when they are not special. And we say team sports you that you're a member of the team, but team sports also teach you that you're special. That you're special. So if you're special, the rules don't apply to you. And we see it across the board. We see it in all levels of our society. And we want to make athletics the place that we point our finger at. But it's us. It's a symptom of us. It's a symptom of us and what we value and who we value. Celebrity and stars of whatever type we will excuse because we would rather them be things than people. Because if we have to look at you with 3 dimensions, then you can disappoint us. If you're a fully vested human, then you can hurt me as a fan. But if I only view you through the lens of football player, basketball player, whatever, actor, musician, if I only view you through that lens, no matter what you do, I'm judging you by that work. Your morality no longer matters to me. It's your work. And if I am only judging you by your work, as long as your work remains excellent, then my opinion of you will be high. But once you have no more value to me as an entertainer, once you have no more value to me as an athlete, and then you perform some act that is beyond the norm, because then you deviate and go out and commit a crime, that protection is no longer there. That protection doesn't exist for you anymore because you have nothing to offer. So then it becomes real. And that's the part that we have to work on changing, because it's the same way for the coaches who are bigger than the university presidents. It's the same for the athletic directors. It's the same for the boosters. It's the same for the NCAA administrators. It's the same across the board, that everybody has been given a certain level of entitlement where the coach isn't to be questioned, to where the salaries are justified, no matter, and your team is losing horribly. Your school is 1-13. And what the program will say is, we're not spending enough money. Anything else in life, you see them all the time in your school district, at home, in your community. When something ain't going good, they say, we're going to cut the budget. These schools are underperforming. We're going to cut the budget. Your athletic program is underperforming. We got to spend more. We're not paying enough for coaches. We're only paying $1 million. We got to put it up to $3 million. And that's a race that most schools cannot win. It's an arms race that most schools cannot win. And for what? For a couple more, increased enrollment because you made it to the NCAA tournament, because you got to a bowl game. If the only reason people are donating to your school is because of the fact that you are competitive in athletics, then they don't really love your school. They don't really love the school. If the only reason you donate is to keep the athletic programs on, then what is the school open for? And that's the question that's going to be the question that a lot of schools have to ask going forward, because I'm telling you, this economic crisis is hitting these schools very hard. And parents are not taking out the loans that they were taking before. Students aren't going to take these loans out. They're going to be going to community colleges. They're going to be going to state schools. And a lot of these institutions are not going to be having the funds that they had, the student fees, because people are doing more remote learning. All those things that they use to prop it up, it's just not going to be there. And there's going to be a lot of these schools that are going to programs, football programs, and minor athletic number impacts just as easily as football will generate revenue for the best programs. For the lion's share, it is a loser financially, but it is a status symbol. You can't be a real school if you don't have a football team. It's a status symbol. But if you can't afford it, then maybe you shouldn't have it. Like I say, if you have to ask how much it costs, then you can't afford it. All these teams, all these leagues that they're saying that they have to ask how much money they're going to lose. And if this is 1 year, if 1 year, then you're at that level. If 1 year of anything can destroy you, how strong were you? All right, let's take a quick break just to give you the top of the hour ID here. And shortly, I'll be joined again by Dino Hanson. But you are listening to KYOK 1140 AM, 92.3 FM. And this is The Lunch Break with AJ Jones. I am David Grubb, filling in. Like I said, we're still having a few technical issues. It's the first day doing this. And the engineers are working to try to smooth it out. And hopefully, again, tomorrow we'll have it a little bit tighter. But things are going, I think we're having a good show so far. I think we're having a good conversation. You can text me. I can't, because today I can't see the Facebook feed. So I do see the comments. So as long as you send me the comments, or if you have a question, feel free to send it. If you want to text me, you can send me, if you want to send a question to my social media, you can send it to Twitter at DM Grubb, and I can look at it there as well. We can do that. When Dino Hanson comes on, so we're going to talk about the Boogie Cousins signing for the Rockets. We're going to talk about Christian Wood. We're going to talk about the reformation and what Houston is going to look like this season. And we're going to talk more about some more of these restrictions that are getting added as more and more players go on COVID lists and how leagues are starting to adapt. The NFL now has added a restriction now that every player on the sideline has to wear their mask. So you'll see a lot more of the pull-up hoodies to cover their mouths this weekend. And the fines have been getting bigger as teams have gotten more lax. And as stadiums are letting more people into the buildings, even as, again, COVID spikes. So it's a very dangerous situation. It's a very dangerous situation. Let me hit a quick music break. I'm just hit an instrumental for a second, just so I can catch my breath, because I've been talking so much. I got to catch my breath and get myself a little water. So let me hit a little instrumental for y'all real quick. And I'll be right back in just a moment. So let's see here. Let's see what we got. I'm gonna tell AJ. Wait till I call AJ this evening. I'm gonna get on him. All right, welcome back to the lunch break here on KYOK Radio in Houston. I am David Grubb, filling in for AJ Jones. And the NFL, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, has just announced its semifinalists for the Hall of Fame, 25 players in all. So I'm going to go through these names and give you my opinion on these, because I think the Hall of Fame has gotten very strange. Hall of Fames are problematic for me in some ways, just because, look, in the NFL, offensive linemen and specialists get no love. Offensive linemen there are so few. Kickers, so few. Returners, so few. And there are legends like a Devin Hester, who I think absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. And there's my man. Hey, Dino, can you hear me, brother? Can you hear me? All right, we're going to give him a second. But I'm going to go through the list while he gets his mic in order and everything. So these are the 25 modern era players semifinalists. You got Eric Allen, spent his career predominantly with the Eagles, also played with the Saints and the Raiders. Jared Allen, played for the Minnesota Vikings. Willie Anderson, Flipper Anderson. Rondé Barber, the cornerback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Cornelius Bennett, former linebacker with the Buffalo Bills. Tony Baselli, offensive tackle, Jacksonville Jaguars. Leroy Butler, who was part of the Green Bay Packers Super Bowl team with Brett Favre. Alan Faneca, the Steelers. Rodney Harrison, who played safety for the Chargers and the Patriots. Torrey Holt, who's part of the Greatest Show on Turf. Calvin Johnson, who I think is one of the top 4 receivers of all time for the Detroit Lions. Megatron. John Lynch, safety, played predominantly for Tampa Bay. Peyton Manning. Clay Matthews Jr., who the Matthews family certainly well known in Houston. Sam Mills, who I've been waiting to get in for too long. Sam should be already in there. Richard Seymour played for the Patriots. Steve Tasker from the Bills, special teamer. Fred Taylor, Jacksonville Jaguars. Zach Thomas, linebacker, Miami Dolphins. Hines Ward from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Reggie Wayne, a Louisiana native, played for the U and for the Indianapolis Colts for most of his career. Patrick Willis, the outstanding linebacker for the 49ers. Charles Woodson, who won the Heisman at Michigan and, of course, played for the Raiders and the Packers, was Defensive Player of the Year. Darren Woodson, who played for the Dallas Cowboys, and Bryant Young, the defensive lineman for the San Francisco 49ers for a number of years. Those are your 25 modern era player semifinalists. Dino, can you hear me, my man? For some reason I can't hear you. I'm not getting you. Let me see. Try it again. Let me see. For some reason I'm not getting you. Let me see. I don't know what the issue is, but I'm going to check on that in a second. While I try to get that figured out. I look at that list, and I think the shoe-ins, Calvin Johnson is a shoe-in. Calvin Johnson is an absolute shoe-in. It shouldn't even be a question for Calvin. Yes, now I can hear you, Dino. There you are. All right. So let me welcome to the show then, formally, my friend, my brother, my colleague. We work together. We just hang out together. And typically he joins me once a week for what we call high-low on my Hard in the Paint podcast, where we discuss the NBA, but we do everything. We do football, we do basketball, we do all kinds of stuff together. Dino played college ball at the University of Oregon, played overseas for a few years. He's been a coach. He's worked in the NBA. So my man has a vast level of information to share. How are you doing today on this Tuesday, my friend?
I'm fantastic, my brother. Good to be on with you, and I appreciate that introduction, man. Yes, we are definitely colleagues, brothers, and friends. We do everything involving all aspects of broadcasting, man. And I couldn't have a better brother, a better colleague, a better student of the game, because we always tell people we aren't fans of the game. We do and we love the game, but we are continual students, which means that we're always working and studying at what we do, and fortunate enough to be passionate about what it is that we do and talk about, man. From covering high school athletics that we do together, from the streaming to the PA announcing to congratulations to you at Tulane in the new.
And we've done college games together as well.
Absolutely. We do college games together for Dillard University, and the list is endless of what we've done. And little do people know, we have even more to do. We haven't even scratched the surface of what our expectations and plans are.
So, Dino, I went through the list of these modern semifinalists for the Hall of Fame. Like I said, I think Calvin Johnson, Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson are all locks. Those three are locks. Everybody else, I don't know who gets in. I think Jared Allen will probably get in because of his sack numbers. But to me, it seems like the guy who's getting. I think Sam Mills, and we're both New Orleans people, but I think Sam Mills, regardless of that he's a Saint or not, Sam Mills belongs, and it's long overdue that he should be in the Hall of Fame.
It's amazing that he hasn't gotten in. It's amazing that the linebacking core that the Saints had during that dome patrol haven't gotten the recognition that they just justifiably and notably deserve what they did all the way across that board, to Ricky, to Pat, who am I missing?
Vaughn.
Of course, Sam. Who am I missing? Who am I missing?
Vaughn. Big Vaughn Johnson.
Yeah, Vaughn. Yeah. Hey, Dave, it's amazing that those guys are not highly recognized, and what they brought to the game itself, not just impacting a city and the team, but you knew that you had four seasoned guys who were students of the game, and you can tell the way in which they played the game, they knew exactly what they were all about. And Sam Mills is at the core of that aspect of what the defense brought to the New Orleans Saints. I mean, again, if not for those linebackers, I think people would still be wearing bags. Despite Drew coming in, people would still be wearing bags and would not have the same level of pride that they have if not for those guys. Those guys, I think, were the catalyst that changed the landscape to the New Orleans Saints football organization.
Yeah, they took him from laughing stock to legitimate contender. Just them, 4 guys. They didn't have the offense. There was the only Pro Bowler they had on offense was the kicker. And then, defensively, they only played with 2 other guys who made 1 Pro Bowl on that defense. And the Dome Patrol was rated the number 1 linebacking core of all time by the NFL. And yet Ricky is the only one in. And I think that it's a problem. But like I said, Calvin Johnson, his record speaks for himself. Megatron, there's never been anybody like him. In my rankings, I have him as the 4th best receiver of all time. 3rd best, excuse me. I have him actually as 3rd. I go Jerry Rice, and it's still Jerry by a good distance. Then Randy Moss, then Calvin. And then my 4th is a surprise to a lot of people. But I think if you go back and look at how great he was, my number 4 is Sterling Sharp. And Sterling was the first dude to break that 100-catch barrier.
I'm sorry, your number 4 was who? I'm sorry, you
Sterling Sharp, the first dude to break the 100-catch barrier, who had the yardage record for a long time. See, in and out. Sorry, man.
In addition to being Shannon's big brother, is that better?
Yes. Got you.
Is that better, Dad?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
In addition to being Shannon's big brother, which Shannon always lets and is proud to let people know, if not for Sterling, he wouldn't be the player, let alone the man that he grew into and is to this day. Sterling Sharp was a man amongst boys long before we knew what men amongst boys looked like, if you will, to a degree at that position specifically. And as far as Jerry Rice, I don't know if you saw the post on Twitter where we were talking about Jerry Rice, and I mentioned to one of the followers, let me tell you the aspect that Jerry Rice brought. And the reason why I knew firsthand who and what Jerry was about even more so on a personal level is because my dad, who coached on the high school level, on the collegiate level, as well as the professional level, he had the luxury of coaching Jerry Rice. There is a Jerry Rice in New Orleans.
Yes, there is.
Great football player as well. But he had the pleasure of coaching Jerry Rice for 4 years while he was at Mississippi Valley. And it had to do with the fact of people not understanding, yes, he is the greatest receiver ever, but Jerry wasn't fast, far from fast. He had speed, but Jerry wasn't going to run by you. What Jerry did was he ran precise routes, and everything you threw his way, he was going to catch. And that alone made him the greatest receiver because he knew and studied how to get separation. My dad used to tell me stories. My dad is going on to pass now, but he used to tell me stories because, of course, I wasn't in Mississippi Valley, and my younger brother was, who also played college ball. But they would talk about Jerry making it a point to catch bricks with his hands on purpose. They would talk about how Jerry, and I don't know if anybody's ever been to Mississippi Valley and Itta Bena, Mississippi.
There ain't much there.
There's nothing there except Mississippi Valley. Literally, when I tell you you could drive through Itta Bena and you wouldn't even know that you had driven through Itta Bena, that's just how much nothing is there. But they talked about Jerry's work ethic. They talked about his precision running routes and the fact that if you threw him a football, he was going to catch it no matter what. What Jerry did, given that he wasn't supposed to be the receiver that he became in the NFL, is one of the greatest stories ever of any athlete, followed by Randy Moss, of course. I mean, how can you not appreciate the skill set and at 6'4", who did have breakaway speed, although it didn't seem like he had breakaway
He ran
speed.
easy, as
He
we say.
ran so smooth and easy. It's literally him smoothly running by you as a defensive back. You're looking like, there's no way Randy is running. Oh my gosh, Randy is running past me now. It was one of those situations with Randy.
That
And that's the
stride,
thing.
man. Like
Oh,
he had an incredible stride.
oh my gosh. And even though he doesn't get a lot of credit on that list, and of course we're talking about those in the Hall of Fame now, but somebody else,
Mhm.
when I think of Jerry Rice, I think of a Larry Fitzgerald for Arizona. The
Mhm.
guy does not have breakaway speed, but his precision running routes, his catchability with any ball that's thrown in his direction, and aside from what he does off the field, he has just been that consistent wide receiver that you can always go to. I love guys like that who put in the work ethic, who had all the strikes against them, if you will, because they didn't have that breakaway speed like an Antonio Brown, but yet they still were able to get it done at a high clip,
I think people just forget how great Jerry was. And I tell people all the time, I said the greatest season, maybe in the history of the NFL for a skill position player, was Jerry's 1987. Because he scored 22 touchdowns in 12 games. That was a strike year. He scored
man.
22 touchdowns in 12 games. It took Randy Moss how many years later? We talking about that was 2001, 2005? No, not 2005, 2003 when the Patriots went 17-0 and lost to the was it two no, I can't think it was 06. But you know what I'm saying? It was almost 30 years.
30
It
years,
was almost
yeah.
20 years
20, no,
for somebody to
21.
break that record.
Yeah.
20 years to break that record.
Mhm,
And he had to do it in 16.
mhm.
If Jerry had gotten those other 4 games, he might have scored 30 touchdowns that season.
Oh man. And again, he was just that guy. And then the other thing, Dave, the moment was never too big for him. Ever. He never shied away from it. The thing that I loved about Jerry, and my dad used to talk about it, was the fact that, and the reason why the moment was never too big for him is because he literally prepared himself for those big moments so that it wasn't anything shocking. It was also a situation where he knew what he was supposed to do. He was prepared for any situation that came his way and any ball that was going to be thrown his way. And the guy literally was a student of the game, even at the end of his career when he was in Oakland. He was still that effective wide receiver, man. He just was. And there are certain guys that athletically and talent wise, they may not have what scouts perceive to be somebody who's going to be a Hall of Famer. Even when we go back to
Mhm.
the Sam Mills, excuse me, Sam Mills situation, he's undersized,
Yep.
but yet they made plays, man. They studied the game literally, and it's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, Jerry was definitely that guy. And I'll tell you somebody else who I wish would have also gotten a recognition. And it's funny because of course I've had people say, "Man, I know you and Dave are extremely close. But do you guys ever disagree on anything?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we've disagreed on
Mhm.
things. People just don't realize it because we're always even our even our somewhat disagreements, I guess they always seem aligned even when we disagree about certain things.
Mhm.
But with that said, and I don't know your feeling on this, but dude, I was a huge Terrell Owens guy. Huge.
Yeah, I love T.O.
And
I think just the one thing about T.O. is, for me, is he is not as precise the route runner that the other guys are. He's a guy, but T.O. is somebody who I would say, and I'll get into this more when we talk about Peyton Manning. T.O. might be the greatest overachiever at wide receiver of anybody in that group. In the top 10 all-time receivers, T.O. might be the greatest overachiever considering where he came from, how bad his career started with all the drops and all the things like that. His, not really getting along with Jerry and being kind of, and all that, to go to where he got to, man, T.O., like I said, he might be the greatest overachiever at wide receiver that ever.
He's someone who made himself a phenomenal receiver. The speed was always there, but the guy got faster. He got stronger.
The power, like his body.
It's
him and Calvin. He and Calvin are the two most ripped, like outside of DK Metcalf now, who is not a human being.
My gosh.
But the just elite guys is T.O. and Megatron were just physically something that you had never seen before.
Dude, DJ Metcalf is the Terminator himself, to be that big, that physically strong, and be able to run down or run by anybody. Oh my gosh. Dave, DJ Metcalf is that guy. But yeah, going back to T.O., he wasn't a great route runner. He was always, if you tell him to give me a 10 and out, he might give you 8 or 9 and zigzag out. It was never precise the way you needed it to be. But once he understood the importance of the gifts that he had, and then taking that weight room to another level. And I know that very well, because going to the University of Oregon as a little scrawny 175-pound 18-year-old kid, all of a sudden after my freshman year, I'm 185 pounds. And Dave, that 185 pounds might not sound like a lot to people, but it was 10 pounds of muscle. And more importantly, it was 15 pounds mentally that I felt like could out-muscle anybody. And T.O. began to do that. He physically knew he was stronger than you and he was faster than you. And yeah, I wish that the situation could have worked out better with him and Jerry while they were there, because, dude, they could have gone down as the two greatest dynamic duo receivers in the history.
And even Philly is like, Philly. Donovan McNabb's career would have been so much different had they been able to work that out. Like T.O. was exactly what Donovan McNabb needed. But let's go on to Peyton Manning, because I think Peyton Manning is the most overachieving quarterback of all time. Because again, physically, there's nothing about Peyton Manning that you would say is classic. He's not athletic. His arm wasn't great. The ball wobbled when it left his hands. It was never a tight spiral. The limitations that you would take on Peyton Manning, you'd say he's just, if you saw him on the street, he'd look kind of like a Tom Brady. It's like, yeah, he's big, but he doesn't look like a quarterback. But Peyton Manning figured out the math. He made quarterbacking math in my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, he figured out the angles and how to play the angles. The one problem I always had with Peyton Manning is, like, he's a virtuoso piano player with no soul. You know what I'm saying? Like, he knows all the notes. They are technically perfect, but you don't feel it. So watching Peyton Manning is a phenomenal exercise when at his peak in precision and all those things. But when it came time to play the music, you know what I'm saying? When you play the Patriots or somebody like that, when it's time to improvise the music, come up with something right on the spot, he doesn't have that. That was the one thing I think that he missed throughout his career, is that he's virtuoso without soul.
Okay, so you're going to make me go in my closet and get my autographed Super Bowl Peyton Manning jersey from him specifically, because those who don't know me, newsflash, Peyton Manning to me is the greatest quarterback ever in the history of football. And I'm going to tell you why. I've always loved the fact that Peyton Manning, in any given situation, he never shied away from the moment. Now, of course, I'm being somewhat facetious when I say the greatest of all time. That's just my personal preference. But the thing that I love about Peyton Manning, let's not forget, he never had that balanced running attack, if you will. Even when he had Edgerrin James, even when he had Marshall Falk. Hold on, let me finish.
Joseph Adai, he had thousand
Hold on,
yard rushes after
let me
Andrew
finish.
James gonna be in the
I
Hall of
said let me
Fame.
I said let me finish. See,
All
people,
right.
me and Dave do disagree. All right. So as I was getting ready to say, including Joseph Adai. Remember, I named two already, and then I was adding Joseph Adai. With that being said, even with those running backs, you still knew he was going to get the ball out to them in the flat. You knew he was going to put them in positions where they ran uh, screens, which was more effective for them. What I was going to say is, over the duration of his career, he spent the majority of the time having to throw the football and defenses knowing he's going to throw the football because that's what he has to do. One of my favorite quotes is from Ray Lewis when Ray was playing in Baltimore. And this is what he felt about Peyton Manning. And I feel the exact same way. Despite the com- despite the comedian that he is, that people don't realize, he is a huge SNL host and why he's had some of the best skits ever on SNL. But just in general, Peyton's just a great and fantastic individual. But I say all that to say this. They asked Ray Lewis what makes the sheriff so good out of all the quarterbacks he's ever played. And Ray Lewis goes, "Man, are you serious?" He goes, "Do you know what it's like playing against a quarterback who knows your plays better than some of the players on your own team knows your
But
plays?"
that's my point. That's my point. He made it the
He
math.
made it.
He made
Yes.
math.
So
But
that's
that's what I'm
what I'm saying.
saying.
Even when we
There's no art. His art is the part
no,
that's missing. The legends
even
that we the legends that we really revere, whether it's Joe Montana or Roger
Steve
Staubach
Young, Roger
or
Staubach,
the people that
Terry
you put up there,
Bradshaw.
there's art to it. There's a certain amount of beauty and poetry to it. And Peyton is cold efficiency. You know what I'm saying? Like that's Peyton is cold efficiency, and that's fine. But I think that's the one thing that's I feared Joe Montana growing up. You know what I'm saying? Like if Joe Montana had the ball, I was like, this is gonna be a problem. But there are enough times that we saw where Peyton made the mistake, would throw the pick at the wrong time in the postseason against.
Mhm.
He didn't have like Joe Montana wasn't perfect in the postseason. We saw him take beatings from the Giants. We saw him take beatings from the Bears. We saw him take beatings from the Redskins. But he won enough of those games that you didn't feel like that any of those teams owned him. It felt like Peyton was owned by the Patriots. You know what I'm saying? Like his nemesis, the one team that he had to deal with, like owned by them.
A lot of credit, most certainly, and you know this well, my brother. There are certain teams that just have your number. Regardless of what it is that you bring to the table, there are certain teams that always seem to manage to just have your number. The Patriots was that Lex Luthor to Peyton Manning and the Colts when he was there. It just
Okay,
was.
what
Even in
about
Denver, even in
that
Denver.
Seattle, that Seattle butt whooping in the Super Bowl? That that was, and then the next year he was again. His last Super Bowl was the defense. It wasn't him. And he didn't have a great one against Chicago.
See, I guess I block out those painful moments for the sheriff. Seriously, Dave, you're gonna make me go in the room and put my autographed jersey from Peyton Manning on because I love the sheriff so much. But in all seriousness, I think what Peyton did for me, he reminded me, and I know you saw these kind of guys as well, Dave. They weren't the best running quarterbacks. They weren't the most accurate passers all the time. They weren't great at practice. They didn't do anything that was off the charts that wowed you, but some kind of way they just managed to get it done and make everybody around them believe in him. Peyton Manning to me was that guy. And yeah, he's a Hall of Famer to me. He's been a
Oh
Hall
yeah,
of
he's a Hall
Famer.
of Famer, no doubt, no doubt.
And
But
and
I don't think it's an insult though to say he's an overachiever. I don't think
and
that's
that
an insult.
to me, an overachiever is somebody who wasn't expected to be a Hall of Famer or a top tier level quarterback like he was. And they put in the work in the video room. They put in the work on the field to work on specific precision timing with his receivers. So yeah, he definitely was an overachiever. Absolutely. There's nothing negative about saying that for anybody that they overachieved because the bar wasn't set high and the expectation level wasn't necessarily there for Peyton the way that it was.
Because I
Oh,
mean,
Tom Brady.
we both saw Eli had better talent in every area. If you were asking if like physical talent, Eli was better at everything. Eli moved better than Peyton. Eli had a stronger arm than Peyton. Eli was, just a better physical specimen. But Eli didn't have the attention to detail. He didn't have the
Exactly.
relentless mindscape to watch every bit of film that you ever put to tape. Peyton had watched it. He knew if your finger stuck out an extra inch before you were ready to blitz. That's what his mind separated him so much more from the other parts of him.
He had that level of focus. And yeah, that's what made him the overachiever that he was. The guy, Peyton knew his limitations and worked at, okay, I know I can't do X, Y, and Z, but I know I can put in the time in the video room and I know I can put in the time. Think of all the off season that him, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison spent together to the point they were literally like one brain on one accord
That's
in
why they didn't
sequence.
move. That's why they never changed sides of the field. They
You
always
know,
stayed in the exact same spot every play.
exact same spot. And the thing the final piece that I'll leave with this is the thing that also made Peyton who he was. You just had more of a belief in him, despite some of the shortcomings and some of the decisions down the stretch. He still made you believe that he was going to be that guy that made that play for you. There just something was about that, you know.
Yep. Let's go on to something for Houston. Boogie Cousins signing with the Rockets.
Boogie,
Apparently,
yes.
I am this to me. What does this mean to you? Because I'm a little confused. You signed Christian Wood. You Christian Wood. I love Christian Wood. And I think he's really about to explode as a basketball player. I get taking a low risk on Boogie, but you and I both know Boogie's personality. We have been around him. We know, like, he is not coming to be part of the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, Boogie believes he wouldn't still be playing if he didn't think he was a difference maker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's going to be interesting, and I thought I saw some of that calming effect when he was in LA, but being on a winning championship caliber team calms everybody when they have somewhat of a cantankerous attitude and mindset. It's interesting that you started off the basketball aspect with Boogie in Houston because I don't know if you're starting to see it. And the trend is, Dave, NBA organizations are looking like they're going back to traditional basketball. You've got bigs on every team. You've got, even though you still have guards, three of them that can do multiple things. They can handle the ball, they can score, but you're going back to a traditional three out, power forward, and center. Sounds like a little high low to us. Maybe it was preemptive and premonitions on our part that we called our segment high low. Because at the end of the day, analytics, Dave, I don't think people realize they've always been a part of basketball. When we got scouting reports, that's because our coaches and our scouting staff, they spent time telling us tendencies of this player, they're shooting XYZ percentage from here. So it's always been part of that. It's become on steroids of late because there are a lot of people who want to feel like they're overly engaged and they know more about the game because of this and that. But yet we still do things called the eye test. As players, as coaches, we just know what works. Throw analytics out, but we know what's effective. The fact that Houston mortgaged everything to go small ball when you and I said from the beginning it was never going to work because other teams are going to play to their strength and make you have to play their way of basketball. This is what scouting and adjusting is all about. Well, now that's get blown up because it was unsuccessful and now you've got Boogie there. We don't know Boogie's health. And that's the same way I feel when people start making all these predictions of, well, this team is going to be that, and this team is going to be this. And you're like, hold on. We haven't even gotten to draft night, nor have we gotten to free agency yet. We don't even know the makeups of any teams and what they're going to look like yet.
Cool.
So I love that there's been so much activity on day one. These past 7 days have been it's been a feeding frenzy of players moving, who wants to go where, I want to be here, you name it across that gambit. So, do we know what we're going to get from Boogie? God, no, because it's literally 2, 3 years now that we have not seen Boogie play. Additionally, let's not forget their new head coach, who has
Steven
a
Silas.
Steven Silas, of course, son of the great Paul Silas. We don't know, well, we know Steven Silas' temperament as an assistant coach. Making that step over and transition to a head coach is an entirely different ball game, and we aren't sure. And God knows I wish Boogie the best because I love Demarcus simply because, and not just because I got to know him when he was here in New Orleans, but I made a joke one time. He was coming out the locker room, and I didn't realize he was even walking up behind me. And I was telling some other people outside the locker room, I said, if Boogie wasn't playing NBA basketball, you do realize he'd be in jail, right? And I wasn't saying it, and I wasn't saying it in a bad way. And he bust out laughing, and I was like, "Boog." He was like, "Dino." I go, "Boogie." I wasn't saying it that way. I'm saying in the sense of you're a bully. You want to house everybody and everything. You want to run everybody and everything on your team. So he started laughing. He and I became close from that. That being said, my only concern is, and mind you, they'll win games if Russell and James stay there, which I perceive they will stay there, despite James wanting to go to Brooklyn.
Nobody's, yeah.
That would be a terrible. That'd be
I can't see
terrible
the
for
Wizards
Brooklyn
sending
for him to
John
stay.
Wall out for Westbrook either. I just
Not
can't see that happening.
because John Wall and Russell are too much alike players, so that would make no sense whatsoever.
And
But
John's younger. So, I mean, like,
I
John's
just hope
younger.
Boogie has garnered that temperament, be in a position where he's not going to try to, where he's not going to try to step over Steven Silas because that's just a personality. He just has that dominant personality, and that's what I meant about him being in jail. It wasn't saying anything negative. It's just that he has a very aggressive, over the top personality. He's also a very moody person and basketball player, especially. But winning solves all that. And again, it's interesting. PJ Tucker, Boogie Cousins, Eric Gordon, uh, James Harden, and Russell. You actually have,
And
if they
Christian
can,
Wood. And
and
Christian
Christian
Wood,
Wood.
don't. Yeah,
And
don't.
absolutely, no, absolutely. I'm not leaving out Christian Wood at all. You bring Trevor Ariza back as well to give them some
Mm-hmm.
stability, to give them that seasoned veteran that you need, that calming voice who also defends. He's that long wing. I wouldn't be surprised, in all honesty, Dave, if Boogie is healthy and can go along with the process, I wouldn't be surprised if Houston is better than what people are thinking they are going to be. But again, it goes back to Steven Silas's impact on that team. But I love Boogie being there. Boogie's always been my guy. Always.
Yeah, I think Boogie is one of the most interesting people to talk to in the NBA. People don't know how smart he is about the game. He's a very smart basketball player. But like you said, Boogie is very much a why guy. And I'm a why guy. Before I'll do something, you got to tell me why. There are different kinds of people. Some people are how guys. The first question is, you tell them to do something, how do I do that? And Kobe Bryant, quite frankly, was a why guy. Shaq was a how guy. Kobe was a why guy. And you have to learn how to balance that and control it. But Boogie is most definitely a why guy. And when you put too many of those guys together, and I think that's why he and Rondo had butted heads a few times, is because they're both why guys. And you
Russell
better have
how guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Russell is a how guy, 100% all the time.
But you get different kinds of why, because James is a why guy.
Yes, he is.
But he's a different kind. He's a passive aggressive why guy. Whereas DeMarcus is, are you going to tell me why right now? Because if you asking me to go step on that court, I'm not doing nothing until y'all understand what exactly it is you're asking of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that you can have more than one level of why guys. Like you can be 3, 4. Like there are different layers to why guys as well as how guys.
Because some guys who are asking how are because they don't know. They have no clue. How? How am I supposed to do that? Then there's other guys like, how? Show me and I got it. Yeah.
Right. And that's the how I got it, Russell kind of guy that he is. I really hope, Dave, I'm not going to lie. I want to see Boogie have a really good comeback season. I feel of late he's gotten a very raw deal where he wasn't able to finish the season with the Lakers. He wasn't able to finish the season with Golden State when they were on a championship run. I mean, those are rings that he missed out on. I really want to see Boogie get himself playing at a high clip and competing for a championship because, there are just certain people that even if somebody was to ask me, well, what is it about Boogie that you just like? I go, well, aside from him having a high basketball IQ and him being somewhat of a cantankerous person, I just like Boogie.
He's an honest dude. For better or for worse, he's honest.
He carries that on his chest, and I like that about Boogie. I like the fact that he shows you his vulnerable side as well. When he's hurt,
he can be hurt. He can absolutely be hurt.
Yes. And I like that about Boogie, man. Boogie was just one of those guys that I was drawn to from the moment he got to the NBA. And when he came to New Orleans, even more so, especially once he and I got to talk, man. There's just something about Boog that I like. But here's the other side that people don't know. He's also a very fun-loving, funny guy as well. Extremely unselfish and will try to help out so many people sometimes early on to a fault that came.
Yeah, he will definitely get engaged in the Houston community.
Yes.
Like he wasn't in New Orleans a full year.
Yes.
And he did more than a lot of players did in their whole time in New Orleans.
And more than a lot of organizations. He was actively engaged, man. He really, really was. And that's why because despite the moniker that he has of being that street bully, Boogie is really just he's really a nice, good dude. He is.
He's high strung. He's high strung. And you have to know how to deal with him. And the whole thing is if you don't push back, he doesn't respect you.
Right.
That's the thing. Is if you don't push back.
I was just saying that's what made him and Mike Malone blend so well.
He loves Mike Malone to this day.
Oh, man. He talks and raves about Mike Malone to this day because Mike Malone explained to him why, but then Mike Malone also didn't allow Boogie to push him around. And Boogie respects Mike Malone for that.
And that's all he has ever asked for. Every stop that he's ever been in, whether it was in Sacramento and he had his problems, he's always said, just treat me like a man. Just treat me like a man. And for better or for worse, look, you got to live with some bad things with Boogie. There's going to be some ill-advised shots. There's going to be a moment where he thinks he can take everybody off the dribble. It's going to happen. But if you harness that dude, I still think, because of the fact that his game has never been about athleticism, if he is willing to eliminate some of the face up and put his behind on that block still, his footwork is good enough that he could survive, because you don't have, he can figure out the Al Jefferson, Zach Randolph ways to extend his career. If his legs are good enough to get him 60 games, you know what I mean? If his legs can get him 60, I think he can still be a guy who gives you, if he's playing reserve minutes, if he's getting 20 plus minutes a night, I think he can give you 15 and 7, and then they're going to be nice when he drops 20 and 10 on somebody. But yeah, Boogie can still be a good contributor for a good team in the NBA. He's never going to be what he could have been, which was maybe the best post player in the NBA. If he had, gotten refined a little bit, he was on that way. But yeah, he can still be a highly effective player. And I think Houston is a low risk that I think that they're good, that's smart to take.
Absolutely. And I would like to see also, which I think would be really effective, him and Christian Wood in there at the same time. And I'm sure they're going to have those situations where they line up like that, because just like you, I was a Christian Wood fan as well, and what he brought to the table and how he made other players around him better. And the fact that Christian Wood is also a guy, as crazy as it may sound, in this day and age, he's still a total team player, if you will. He's that kind of individual that will make your team better. So I would like to see him and Boogie in there together at the same time. But I'm loving the direction that the NBA is going again, and not just to prove that, hey, Dave Grubb and we were right. No, basketball is still basketball at the end of the day. And these are the things that are effectively going to always work, and these are the things that are not. Basketball is not just a passing fancy or a fad, as what Houston was trying to do, because that's what I've always considered. It was gimmicky. It was a fad. It wasn't going to be sustaining in the long term. And people fell in love because of what Clay, God knows, man, my best at Clay.
Yeah, I feel so bad for Clay, man.
Oh my gosh. But what Steph and Clay were doing made people think that, oh, small ball. And you're like, wait, no, hold on.
But they weren't playing small ball.
Thank you, Dave.
Andrew Bogut was on the floor. Andrew Bogut was doing all the dirty work. Draymond Green is a small 4, but that small ball lineup of death, David Lee, yeah, that's lineup of death played fewer minutes every year it went on, because they could not sustain having those 5 little guys out there. And as we've talked about before, what the Warriors did offensively, what a lot of these teams think that they're doing, these analytics that they think they figured out, it was just the same. You're seeing the same evolution of stuff that we saw in basketball. Like we said, all the way back to John McClendon, all the way back to those teams that were doing the same thing, spreading the floor, getting in transition. What Ben Jobe did at Southern, same thing. What did Southern do? They trapped you. They got out in the break, and then they spread the floor because they were smaller than everybody else. They didn't have any centers. That's why Bobby Fields at 6'5" was playing center for Southern University.
Yes, sir.
Center, because they were spreading it out and shooting threes with Avery up on one side and these dudes, wherever it was. These are not new things. As you say, the game doesn't change. You're just doing variations on a theme. The same way in music, there are no new chords, right? There are no new chords in music. All of them have been played. It's just how you arrange them. And that's what basketball is. It ain't changing. Y'all think the modern NBA is something. There is no such thing. It is the same game. It's just people are getting more efficient at certain things. You are teaching certain things differently. There are certain things that you value more, but the game itself is still basketball. Did I lose your connect, man?
And
Yeah, there you go.
my guy Eddie Johnson talks about it a lot. Basketball is still basketball. It's not anything. There is nothing that is going to be that new or that creative that is just going to change the landscape and the dynamic of the game of basketball. And those who know and understand, and those who can play the game and can coach the game, they understand it's still basketball at the end of the day. And the gimmicky stuff, it's a passing fancy, especially in the society that we live in. That's a way for everybody to feel like they're involved and they're engaged. Ooh, let me show you this new creative idea. And at the same point in time, there are so many coaches when somebody comes along with that. I've seen so many coaches just kind of do this, like, oh, guy, listen. If I have 2'6'8" guys, and the tallest guy the opposing team have is 6'4" and 6'5", I am not going to have my 6'8" guys on the perimeter shooting long range jump shots.
Nope.
I'm going to play to my strength. Then on the defensive side, I'm going to crowd you and be the wild spider monkey defensively, deflecting passes. I'm like, people, it's still basketball at the end of the day. So, from a purist standpoint, and I'll be the first to admit, yeah, I'm a purist when it comes to the game of basketball because it's not a passing fancy to me. In middle school, I played, well, in middle school and early on in my career, yeah, I had to play center because I was taller than everybody. So I learned, and you and I talked about this for the longest. I love big guys, despite me being a guard in college and in professional level. I love bigs because I understand the purpose of bigs and how to utilize bigs. Still to this day, when I'm working with teams, I prefer to work with their bigs more than I do the guards because I was a guard. But I know how bigs can be so impactful on your basketball team. With that being said, Dave, the fact that it's going back to the purest side of basketball again, where now you've got bigs again, you've got athletic bigs naturally. That
Mhm.
evolves, technology evolves, advancement is there. Of course, you're not going to get a stiff big who can only do one thing, but he's still a big and he can still be effective and dominant, even if it's four out and one in. There's still effectiveness to it. There are still those missed shots that big is going to follow up on and get the easy tip in and get fouled and go to the free throw line. You still need those guys to win basketball games.
There's no substitute for having someone that you can throw the ball into 6 feet from the basket and they can make one move and be at the rim. There's no substitute for that. I don't care what your percentage is on threes. I don't care what your percentage is in the mid range. There is no substitute for having someone who can get that score on the block. The best years of LeBron James' career, as I've said many times, were in Miami, and he feasted on the block. Like LeBron never left the block. There was a reason he was the most efficient scorer in the league for 3 straight years because everything was within 7 feet of the basket for him.
Yep.
Everything was sitting back there. It's fine to shoot threes. And again, this stuff is not new. Bill Laimbeer was shooting stretch threes. You know what I'm saying? Jack Sikma was a stretch big. You can talk about Dan Issel as a stretch big. These players existed. They existed. These concepts were not new. The point forward goes all the way back to Paul Pressey. You know what I'm saying? So we know that these things are not new, but it's just, okay, there's more of them. So y'all think it's new. People who have not been watching the game and have not studied the game, it's new to you, but it's not new to basketball. It's not new to basketball. Why do you think the pick and roll is still the number one set in basketball? Because it's the most effective. It's the oldest thing there is.
Bob Cousy, John Havlicek, Dave DeBuscher, Earl of Pearl Monroe, Willis Reed, they've all been running it since the dawn of time. It's
John
not
Stockton and Karl Malone, they're in the Hall of Fame for running pick and roll.
pick and rolls. Dave, it's nothing new. Again, people come up with these new ideas, their own ideas, as a way of inclusion to make themselves apart. And there's nothing wrong with that. But don't make it out to be this extreme science that basketball is no longer basketball, because I guarantee you, you give me purists like yourself and myself, and you give me these new analytic guys, and I guarantee you we will run circles around them because basketball is still basketball. We're going to talk on defense because these kids nowadays, they don't talk on defense, no matter how much you talk to them about talking on defense. We're going to pick and roll without them even realizing we're having to run pick and roll because it's simple things where they can't see. If I'm on the low post and you're on the perimeter and I come up with my fist like this and you can see me, you know exactly what that is. The exact same way if I come up with my fist like this and as I'm coming, I do that, letting you know I'm slipping the pick for you to drop. It's simple basketball, and that's where we're going to beat you at. The purity of basketball has always been there, and it will always be there.
I'm going to wrap it on this, and then I'm going to let you tell folks how they can follow you. The reason that the Lakers were able to beat the Heat was because LeBron James and Rajon Rondo were smarter than everybody else. It's that simple. Those were the two smartest people on the court, and they were not more talented all the way through than the Miami Heat. They had the two best players, but Rondo should not have been as big a factor, but he was smarter than everybody else on the floor. And that's how we ended. Tell them how they can follow you, and we're going to be out.
And you know I love me some Rajon Rondo. I always
Love him.
always will. That's my guy, man. I love Rajon. But with that being said, you can follow me on Twitter at Dino Hoops 11. Of course, talking nothing but basketball. That's DINO Hoops, the number 11. And mind you, Dave, I want people to understand. It's not that I can't and don't talk other sports. I can. I have a background in it. I grew up playing football before anything else. So football was my first love. It's just that basketball became my passion and what was going to get me to college and what was going to have me playing professionally. So that's the reason why I talk more basketball than anything else, and why when it's not basketball, you don't see that much from me. Anyway, Dino Hoops 11 on Twitter, and the exact same thing on Instagram. That is Dino Hoops 11. The Dean always on the scene, my brother. I greatly appreciate you. And on Facebook, Dino Hanson, Dineaux. Man, it's always my pleasure and my treat, brother, to be on with you, man.
Yeah, and thank y'all to the lunch break crew for welcoming me today. And we'll be back again tomorrow to do it. Of course, you can follow me at DM Grub on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hitpwithdg.com. And today, in about an hour, I'm going to be interviewing the one and only Mr. Chibs, Kenny Anderson, for my podcast today. So I'm hyped to talk to one of the New York City point guards who is now the head coach at Fisk Universities. Yeah, so that's going to be dope. So please check that one out.
Unfortunately, they're not going to have a season this year, right?
No, they're not having a season this year. So Kenny's still recruiting, and we'll talk about that with him. But that's going to be a great pod today.
Man, Kenny Anderson was that dude, man. He was that dude.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. So for Dino, I'm David Grubb, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. Thanks again.